Okay. 3, 2, 1. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hubs by Mozilla VR framework. Today I'm going to be showing you my next project that was developed at the same time that I was working on the library project. That was the video before this one. Mainly I just wanted to show you some updates, mainly because separating the two projects was important, at least in my mind. So let's show you the progress so far. So we'll join the room, allow the general setup. We'll enter the WebXR framework, and voila! Welcome to this general virtual environment. Now, it's not perfect in terms of the resolution, probably just because it's pretty taxing on mobile hardware, at least while I'm recording right now. It'll be a lot smoother whenever it's not in a recording space. But just as a general walk around, that links back to the library, which I'm calling the lobby, simply because it's a little bit easier to display. I have music options, several options that pull in YouTube videos. One is a copyright-free audio clip, so we'll test that out. One's a Neil Cicierega audio, which is rather interesting. And the third is a ELO soundtrack, which I think would be interesting. This particularly is the Blue Denobi, which is a very nice classical soundtrack, which you can listen to while you go through this long hallway of very odd, peculiar graphic designs that I developed over, I think back in 2017. I made over 100 of them, which I thought was interesting. I'll curb this, so that way you're not hearing a gigantic back-end noise the whole time. But sorry for this stupid menu. I can't get rid of it. It drives me nuts as well, and I wish that I could... There's supposed to be some control to remove this, but I can't seem to find any documentation on how to get rid of it on a Quest 2. But hopefully it won't be that irritating. This is a graphic design menu, not menu, a banner. And it's a very long hallway full of, like I said, graphic designs. If you press a button, you'll be able to see it in 3D space in an up-close 3D view. You probably won't be able to see the 3D effect, given that you're probably watching this on a 2D monitor. But it does allow for some level of a 3D view. And then when you press the button again, you can see it in a standard viewport. A lot of these graphic designs are very low level, so to speak. I mean, I made them in maybe a good 10-15 minutes for each one. Probably a little bit less for some of my earlier work, mainly just because I was just trying to test things out, at least in terms of how I see them. So if you want to see my later work first, all you have to do is turn to this side and go backwards in time, so to speak. Instead of going from the beginning, you can simply go from what was most recent. And that gives you a better sense of how far I progressed in terms of making this type of content. And the 3D effect is rather interesting for some of them, at least the newer models. I did mess with a specific level of mainly using specific style editing, which I thought was an interesting concept. And for some reason, the light generation from some of them is rather interesting. Basically, you can just go through all of them. They're also linked on my website, so if you'd like to see them in a little bit more detail, you can do that. But it does give a more interesting aesthetic, at least in terms of a VR space, because you can see them in a different light and a different scale, and they're more up close, and you can get closer to the images and see specifically how they were created. A lot of them hold some fragments of them being PNGs, and they weren't cleaned correctly, but that's my own fault. But ultimately, if you like any of them, feel free to look closer at them. I mean, you can really get in-depth in terms of how they were structured. And it's really interesting to see some of them in a 3D space because you get more detail. You get more detail and just a more interesting aesthetic. Like, this looks incredible in VR, just in terms of the amount of texture. It really does pop out, especially from the black background, given that it's a PNG. By all means, I'll link the room so you can look at them in more detail and see how they were created. Again, this is a pretty quick synopsis of however many I've created over that specific point in time. I think this was around mid-2017. I just went through a summer and I made as many of these as possible just because I was interested in digital artwork and I wanted to be a lot more abstract with my creations. But yeah, if you like any of them, feel free to look at them. There's quite a lot. There's over 140 of them, all set up into sets of 10, I believe, on my website. And in this room, which I'll be linking in the description, has all of them linked in one gigantic long hallway, like the banner over there said. If you really run through all of them, there's quite a lot. And VR is, without a doubt, fascinating. Like, some of them are just breathtaking in terms of what they look like in VR. And I know that's tooting my own horn because I made them, but I mean, I do like how some of these look. I mean, it just, the aesthetics alone for some of them are just breathtaking. So that's basically it. This is a 3D environment. It took a while to load everything in for my website, but it is rather interesting in terms of how they came out. I'm a pretty big fan of some of these designs because a lot of them were sketched first, placed into Photoshop, created into layers, and then ultimately made them. As you can see, my earlier work still had some polishing to do, and they weren't that great in terms of its general setup because it was low-level work and I made them when I was around 20. So, sorry. But it's just a general idea. As you can see, I stretched out this hallway to make it load properly because I didn't have a model type that made it look okay. And I changed the floor type because I like the juxtaposition between a dark purple floor and a black background. And it loads okay for these PNGs, and it goes through a pretty decent setup. If you don't have VR legs, moving around in 3D space using the standard pointer instead of either flying around or teleport mode, it can get kind of disorienting and a little bit confusing, but we'll basically curb that. It just depends on what type of locomotion setting you'd like. That's it. It's a pretty short video. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you want to take a look at it, it's linked in the description. If you like this video, feel free to leave a comment, or leave a like, or even subscribe if you want to see some more of this type of content. I'm going to be developing a lot more in the future, and I think it's going to get to some really weird and somewhat interesting ideas. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it.